Don, from your perspective, are you happiest when you're working with a Samsung Ventures portfolio company, or is it,
Yeah, I think it adds a lot of value if there's both a venture investment to go along with the business arrangement. I find that having an investor on the board, they're able to look after the company in a way and make sure that it's a win-win, make sure things don't get too out of balance in terms of squeezing the puppy. And I think that's a real positive for both sides, actually, in the long term. But it doesn't always work out because the timing, companies raise funding only at certain times, and business needs are usually pretty urgent, and aligning all the stars can be pretty challenging sometimes. So we've had it go both ways, where we've got a business arrangement first, and then we get Samsung Ventures to invest after, and then in the case of 7, there was a Samsung Ventures investment first, and then a business arrangement after.
And just to comment, it used to be kind of a big stigma for a startup to take industrial capital. I think that's pretty much gone away. They're now pretty much part of the venture community. The thing to say on the other side is that one, as a startup, should never expect that it's guaranteed that you have a business relationship afterwards. Ultimately, the operating divisions inside these big companies are going to make their own decision. To Don's point, it's always great to have somebody who has insights into what's going on and perhaps can influence it when things go in a different direction. But ultimately, you have to make sense to the operating divisions.
So it definitely raises the stakes. What's the experience, like the visceral experience of working with a big company? What's the worst thing that happens? What really stresses the relationship? Matt, have you talked to that?
I would say it's. Large companies have much more time than startups. That's what it comes down to. I think they can allocate more time to explore potential possibilities. Whereas for us, it's an opportunity cost. So if we kind of put like 2 or 3 weeks into something and we end up failing, then the result isn't great for us because we're kind of limited resources. So yeah, and then working on new technology is another challenge that, because I am involved in development community, so I'm coming at it from that angle. But when you look at a new platform, you've got to look at it high visibility, being an innovator, but then there's a technical risk. You don't exactly know what kind of distribution carrier partnerships are going to be cemented, and there's a lot of things to consider as a startup. But you do get great PR. And you get to sit on panels like this and
there you go.
Showcase your services at events. So it's I think you've just got to be mindful that they can swallow you up and all your time and your vision. But if it's a good strategic fit, as I said earlier, then that's not a disadvantage.
Yeah, just to underline, no matter how much resource you think it's going to take more. I would say that working with the big handset vendors is a unique situation, particularly if you're going to be embedded. The thing that one needs to realize is not only are they a big company with their own processes, and that you're going to adapt their processes, they're not going to adapt to yours, but they are on an extraordinarily strict timetable. I mean, they have devices which are going to go out, and they must go out, and either you're on the train or you're not. And they're not going to hold the train for you. So it can feel like waterboarding during times. It can be the most intense experience you've ever been through. But if you get on, it's worth it.
And one thing I would say is you also have to learn to pick your battles. Sometimes some of our portfolio companies, every time anything ever goes wrong, they email me. They want to bring it up the food chain. And you just have to be there and sort of help walk them through exactly what's going on. Let them see the forest beyond the trees. I mean, we've had instances where they may not have gotten one certain contract, so they raise a fuss, yet, we're Samsung as a whole is their largest customer. And so you just want to help, a lot of times we just want to help the entrepreneurs keep things in perspective. you guys are doing all the hard work and all the risks on your side, and you're going to have bumps that come along, and it's always easy to blame the corporate partner. But I would just say, keep a long-term view as you approach these things.
John, it's kind of a truism that the lawyer always gets a call when something goes wrong. So what have you seen done wrong in kind of the the working stages of a relationship?
Yeah, well, there are various stakeholders, and in the context of the board, for example, you may have the financial investors as well as management and the corporate partner. And often, I think, if there are issues, it's getting all three stakeholders on the same page with respect to whether it's a product that's being co-developed or the timing of an investment. So, and often the financial investors have a different incentive profile or different incentives than the corporate partner. But as Ross said, I think a lot of the corporate investors in the past probably weren't as cooperative. I think at this point, most people find that corporate partners are much more flexible and realize that it's a greater value proposition for all the constituents. And at the same time, the VCs realize they can't really build a portfolio company in this environment without the help of a corporate partner.
I want to make sure we've got some time for audience questions. Do we have mics for the audience, or we're probably close enough here that you can shout out your questions? So think about questions as we continue discussing, and we'll get to them. Did you all see the news actually that Intel Capital had hired Christine Herron, a fairly well-known early-stage investor from First Round Capital? That I thought was an interesting development. For those of you who haven't heard, Intel basically moved into the early stage, and what we're kind of seeing throughout venture capital, certainly would love the panel's thoughts on this, is venture capital getting kind of differentiated into more kind of layers of investors. You've got angels, you've got super angels, you've got seed stage, early stage specialist funds. At the same time, you have established venture capital firms, corporate venture arms included, kind of moving down to make sure that they're involved in startups at every stage. What do you make of all this flux, and what does it mean for kind of the traditional way we've done corporate partnerships and corporate investing?
Well, talking from the corporate venture point of view, I think corporate venturing is now here to stay. If you looked at it before the dot-com bubble, there's a lot of corporate venturing. After dot-com bubble burst, it all dried up. But what we saw with the latest recession in 2008 is corporate venturing still stayed the same. If you look at the statistics now, I think about 15% of all deals have a corporate investor in. I think about 10% of all capital invested past year came from corporate venture funds. So I think, especially when you look at the broader VC industry, a lot of LP money is drying up for a lot of traditional VCs. So you're going to see a lot of alternative forms of investment, whether it be a corporate investor, still a traditional venture capital fund, or a super angel or the like.
Yeah, I just see it part of the broader trend where startups are able to do a lot more with a lot less capital these days. And even a large company like Samsung, we could partner with 4 guys in a garage that have a really cool Android app and put it on a device and give them massive distribution. So you don't need a lot of capital to get to that point at which you could engage with a large company. You just have to, have the right contacts, have the right solution, work really hard, and have a bit of luck. So,
John, any thoughts on how all of these new players in the venture world are kind of reshaping the way deals get done?
Well, we've definitely seen a lot more activity among the early stage investors and the angels, and then the growth venture capital deals have been increasing. So, but a lot of the mid-range or mid-tier funds are either migrating down or trying to do growth. So, but I think the corporate ventures, as Stephen said, will play a more active role, and fund a larger percentage of a lot of the financings, I think, going forward.
And that middle range that the traditional venture capitalists are kind of moving away from might be where they play an increasing role?
Exactly.
Great. Well, I do want to save time for questions, so if you have questions, Candace has the mic.
So speaking about the NRE topic, the non-recurring engineering costs, how do you actually pass that on to Samsung or an OEM? Is that something that you exchange the NRE costs for equity, or what is the actual contractual arrangement?
Usually, as part of a deal, there'll be a certain amount of work that is specific to the handset vendor, and you negotiate on how much of that the handset vendor or the large company will pay. And usually it's figured on scope of work times an hourly rate, and you come up with a figure. And that's different than a royalty that you would get paid per device or per user per month, depending